All right, so there's a couple weird little things going on with the Casa from Option-O. We're gonna save those more towards the end of this video because there's also a lot of really pretty impressive stuff going on with it too, to be honest. So let's start with the obvious. This is the new entry level grinder from Option-O, who really, they gained influence with this grinder called the P64. Option-O also released the P100, which is like an upsized version of that. They had the Mini, which was the very entry level version of that, which this one picked up from, and the O1, which is kind of their latest super high-end model. Now, people love the Mini because it allowed them to get into that Option-O mojo for, about 375 bucks. This one, which was sent to me by Option-O as a review unit, is a little bit more expensive at 389. It also resolves some of the issues that people had with the Mini, the external power supply that people didn't really like. Early versions of the Mini also had some power issues. This one kind of resolves any of that, so that's fantastic. Workflow on any of their grinders is very simple. You adjust your grind setting up here, which is also the bean funnel in this case. You turn the grinder on, dump your beans in, let it do its thing, and flick the switch to get out any residual. We're gonna come back to that. And then you take your beans and you're good to go. Now, something that this grinder has, which I really like, is this auto off feature. So it will detect when it's done and stop automatically. And the reason why I like that so much is because anytime there's something that you actually have to physically do and you can take that and take it out of your workflow, just kind of walk away, not worry about it, that's a big plus. It's got a 38 millimeter conical burr, which spins at about 140 RPM. Now, very interesting thing about conical burrs, if you didn't know this, they're actually measured from the outside of the outer burr casing. So it's not always a true reflection of the actual functional burr size. The actual size of the lower burr is just over 30 mil, which is a lot closer in size functionally anyways to a 40 mil Baratza burr. So on paper, 48, inner burr closer to 30, take that for what you will. They're also going to be releasing a conical 65 millimeter burr version. They didn't send that to me, but I would love to review it at some point in the future. Just be aware that that's coming, and it will change the grinder's probably taste profile a little bit and performance. All their burrs are what they call Meissen burrs, and they really are more optimized for light roast coffees. So if you're a real light roast person, these grinders are going to be a great fit from you from a taste profile standpoint. Okay, couple things that I love about this grinder. Number one, like I said, dead simple to use. High quality finishes. It feels like an Option-O grinder, which is a good thing. The taste is really good. On filter, I dump a light roast in there. I find I get these big juicy cups with this very clear acidity jumping forward into the cup. Exactly what I was looking for from a light roast filter cup of coffee. In fact, this grinder, as I've had it and been testing it, it really has become my go-to grinder for grinding filter cups. Like, it's fast, easy to use, tastes great, love it. Espresso, let's make an espresso on the grinder. So I have 18 grams of coffee here. Just gonna tear this out, let it do its thing, and 18 grams out without even using the knocker. Perfect. All right, so this is a light roast from Immaculata Farms, roasted by Hatch. And that is a great cup of light roast espresso. That brings that acidity forward, presents it in a really nice way. Like, it's there, it's very present, but it's not like biting your head off, if you know what I mean. Sweet, floral, very nice cup of coffee. So the taste overall on filter and espresso, it's outstanding for a grinder of this price. Okay, let's talk tests. And this was another zone where I really felt like the Casa was coming up to a pretty impressive level. As far as dialing in espresso, I did find it pretty easy to dial in. I was grinding between the 6 and the 7 range, and I was finding, depending on what coffee I was drinking, each one of these ticks could be anywhere, 3 to 6 seconds of adjustment, and the grinder would grind an 18-gram dose in about 30 seconds. Filter, I was about one whole revolution coarser, so turn this all the way around, come back to around the 7 zone, and I found it was just like really good cups. Didn't need to mess with the grind size too much. It was always very flattering, and a 16 gram dose would take me about 16 seconds to grind. Sound, I wouldn't say it has the nicest sound, but sound level wise, it's pretty good at just under 80 decibels. This is where things get really impressive. This is, I think, the lowest retention grinder that I have ever tested. If you don't know what retention is, it's the amount of grinds that are left in there after the grind cycle is finished. And on a single dosing grinder, you really want to minimize that number. On filter coffee, I would get 0 retention. No grounds left inside, no RDT. RDT is spritzing your beans with water before you grind them. Very often it's done to reduce static, to reduce retention. This grinder didn't need it at all. It was flat in, out, 0. On espresso, no RDT. Retention was 0 to 0.01 grams without RDT. That is totally crazy. I don't think I have ever seen that on any grinder that I've used. And what's even crazier is that is without even using the knocker. And I think it's probably due to some clever engineering Option-O has done inside. If you take it apart and you look at the bottom of the grind chamber, it slopes outward towards the outside of the grind chamber. And when paired with the sweep arms, which also have the same curve, it will guide all the last bit of grounds kind of to the edge and then out the chute very effectively. However they did it, it is really cool. If you do want to use RDT for reasons besides static management, like if you like RDT as a part of your espresso process, just be aware that the extra moisture on the beans can cause them to get stuck in the chute, and you need to sometimes push them down. I don't even bother with it. Now I will say on espresso, it would only really hit that next to 0 retention after I had a couple kilos through it. When I first got it, it would retain like 0.2, which is still very low. But then once I had a couple kilos of coffee through this thing, it settled down to basically 0. Also the dosing cup, it fits on a portafilter well. It's got this matte finish inside. The beans just slide right out of it. It doesn't really retain anything either, and it is great to use. So we have a cheap price, fantastic taste, extremely low retention. You have to ask yourself, is this the perfect grinder at this price point? And the answer is no, it's not. I do have a couple, let's say, issues with this grinder. First off, let's talk about the side profile. Option-O grinders are beautiful grinders, and this one, it just kind of looks a little bit off to me from the side. I don't know what you think. I would love to know what you think, but on the side profile, I can see what they're doing, trying to echo the design language of like the O1 in particular, but it's just not really working for me in this case. Now, thankfully, as I was moving the grinder around my house, I found basically most orientations that I had it in. This is the view that I was getting of it, and that view looks great. But the side profile, it looks a little funny to me. And beyond that, as soon as I saw renderings of this grinder and this joint right here in particular, the first thought that came into my head, and it might have come into yours too, is like, that looks like it's gonna either bend or warp or something eventually. It just doesn't look super stable. And I have some bad news here. I'm just gonna show you this. I don't know if you can see or hear that. This is rocking a little bit, and I have a pretty good eye for level. I feel like it's tilted down just a tiny little bit. And I've only had the grinder for a couple weeks. Now, there are some screws under here, some bolts, and I've made sure they're fully tight. And I actually took a video of this and sent it to Option-O with my feedback. I said, hey, like, I'm a little concerned about this. And they said, according to our experience, that falls within the elastic region of the metal, whatever that means. Now, I don't know, like, this really feels like there's play in the joint to me. I don't know, maybe you can make your own judgment of that, but it is a concern of mine, especially since this, this feels really premium when you're turning it, but you also have to use a fair bit of force. And to do that without, giving a lot of pressure downward on here, you feel like you have to watch it a little bit. And then also when you're pressing this down, you just feel like you're putting pressure on that joint. One other thing about the overall design of this grinder, call me shallow or whatever, but I feel like this cup should be centered like right here. Like that's just what looks right to my eye, to have it kind of sticking out like that. I get that that's a thing, you know, with the O1 is like that too. It just feels to me like it should be like this. Now, if you had it like that with the design of the grinder, it would actually spill over the side. I don't know. And tell me what you think. Okay, let's move up to grind adjustment. I like the degree of precision that you get with espresso. You know, you have some good adjustment there to really dial in things the way that you want. But with the way that these settings are kind of built in, to have to go more than one revolution to go to filter, it's kind of tricky to communicate. Like, what do you say for that grind setting? Like 1 revolution plus 7 for filter? It's just kind of clunky to say that. So, you know, I get that that's a compromise of providing enough fidelity on espresso to have a good dial in range. But then once you kind of work your way all the way around to filter, you're trying to tell people what your grind setting is, it's just not the most seamless. Once you get inside, you know, like I said, the internals are pretty impressive. There is one thing, I don't normally say I explicitly would love to see things changed. Getting in here is pretty easy. You just keep unscrewing this until it comes off. Then the upper burr comes out very easily and without any tools, which is fantastic. I love when you can clean a grinder without any tools. That's a huge plus, except once you get to this point, then you need tools because they have this double nut up here going on here. And I feel like, why do you need to make me get a tool at this point? Like I'm almost all the way got the grinder disassembled for cleaning. It feels like a real missed opportunity to not have a quick release nut that you can just twist off and pull the burr and the sweep arms out. This is something that Baratza has and makes for a totally tool-free disassembly on their Encore ESP grinder. I loved that. Option-O, I would love to see a quick release nut on here. I don't know how complicated that is. I think it would be a huge plus on this grinder. So overall, we have a pretty outstanding grinder, to be honest. Not a perfect grinder. I think this joint on here is the most concerning thing that I have, but taste-wise and price-wise, this grinder is pretty great. But I have gotten the question, you know, Justin, if I'm looking at the Casa, why would I not just spend, you know, an extra $100 plus a little bit more and jump into something like the X-Bloom Studio? That is a fair question. There are a couple reasons why, and a couple reasons why you may not want to do that. And I'm going to get you to subscribe and stay tuned for my upcoming X-Bloom Studio review. What I will say is those few extra little issues aside, this one particularly, I was shocked by the performance of this grinder. It feels like a big step up from the Mini in a good way. The workflow is everything that you would hope for from an Option-O, and they have really brought a great grinder to the table. You know, I'm okay to speak honestly about this. As long as this grinder has been on my bar, it really has become my go-to for filter coffee. Like, out of all the grinders that are there, this has been the one that I have really gravitated towards as I have been testing all my stuff. Now for espresso, I don't want to keep winding it all the way around, and I got a lot of great grinders for espresso. It does a fantastic job on espresso, but I just left it on filter. So we have a solid grinder, great workflow, fantastic taste on light roasts especially, extremely low retention, no RDT, hallelujah from saving that step for my workflow, and a couple little issues here. Let me know what you think on the Option-O Casa. I'll be checking the comments. And if you want to see more Option-O content from me, make sure to let me know. I'll catch you on the next one.